What if I told you that most people who fear abandonment aren't actually afraid of people leaving? They're afraid of being right. Right about what you asked? The belief they've secretly carried for years. If people really get to know me, eventually they will leave. And once that belief exists, every delayed reply becomes evidence. Every change in tone becomes evidence. Every canceled plan becomes evidence. Every disagreement becomes evidence. Not because it's true, because your brain has already decided what it's expecting to find. And that's the thing nobody talks about. When you expect people to leave, you stop experiencing relationships as they are, and you start experiencing them through the lens of anticipation. You are no longer asking what is happening. You're asking, is this the beginning of the end? You become a detective, a mind reader, a fortune teller, searching for clues, trying to predict loss before it arrives, trying to prepare for pain before it happens, trying to protect yourself from being caught off guard again. The problem, you can never relax when you're constantly preparing for a disaster. Have you ever noticed how exhausting that is? Someone takes a little longer to reply and your chest tightens. Someone seems quieter than usual and your mind starts racing. Someone needs space and suddenly you're preparing for abandonment. Not because they've left, because your nervous system remembers what it felt like when someone else did. And this is where most people misunderstand themselves. They think, I have trust issues. But often, that's not what's happening. You trust people, at least at first. What you don't trust is stability. You don't trust that good things will last. You don't trust that someone can love you consistently. You don't trust that people can stay the same once they get close. Because your experiences taught you something different. Maybe love was inconsistent. Maybe affection was available one day and gone the next. Maybe you learned that approval had to be earned. Maybe you learned that being loved required becoming whoever everyone else needed you to be. Maybe the people who supposed to stay didn't. Maybe they physically stayed, but emotionally disappeared. And your brain learned something of it. Don't get too comfortable. Don't relax. Don't assume they're staying. And years later, you're still living according to rules created by experiences that may no longer exist. Think about how much energy that takes. You're not just having a conversation, you're analyzing it. You're not just receiving a text, you're interpreting it. You're not just getting to know someone, you're trying to predict how they will hurt you. No wonder why relationships feel exhausting. No wonder you struggle to feel safe. No wonder you find yourself waiting for the other shoe to drop. But here's something that completely changed the way I think about abandonment. The deepest fear is rarely, what if they leave? The deepest fear is usually, what if their leaving confirms everything I already fear about myself? What if it proves I'm not worthy? What if it proves I'm not good enough? What if it proves I'm too much to love? What if it proves that I'm not worthy staying for? That's why abandonment hurts so much. Not because someone leaves, because their leaving gets interpreted as evidence. Evidence for a story you've been carrying for years. And once you understand that, something important becomes clear. The solution isn't finding someone who reassures you enough. Because yes, reassurance feels good, but it rarely lasts. Someone says, I'm not going anywhere. You feel relief for a day, maybe a week, and then anxiety returns. Because reassurance cannot heal a belief. It can only temporarily soothe it. The real work begins when you start questioning the story itself. Who told you that people always leave? Who taught you that being chosen determines your worth? Who convinces you that someone else's behavior is a proof of your value? Because when you really examine those beliefs, you start realizing something. Many of them were formed by a younger version of you, a version that didn't have context, a version that blamed themselves because blaming themselves felt safer than accepting painful truths. Children do this all the time. If a parent is emotionally unavailable, a child often thinks it must be me because that's easier to understand than the person responsible for caring for me is unable to meet my needs. And those conclusions often follow us into adulthood. We become experts at making ourselves the problem. Because if we're the problem, maybe we can fix it. Maybe we can finally earn it. Maybe we can finally earn love. Maybe we can finally earn someone staying. But healthy relationships do not work that way. Healthy relationships aren't built on earning your place. They're built on mutual effort, mutual respect, mutual care, and most importantly, the understanding that your worth does not rise and fall based on another person's choices. That's the lesson abandonment wounds often force us to learn. Because eventually you realize something painful. The goal was never to guarantee that nobody leaves. That is impossible. People leave, relationships end, life changes. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself every time you're afraid someone else might. Because once you stop doing that, you stop shrinking, you stop performing, you stop chasing, you stop trying to become easier to love. And instead of asking, how do I make them stay? You start asking, does this relationship actually deserves access to me? And that's a completely different question. And that is usually the beginning of healing, because healing isn't learning that nobody will leave. It's learning that if someone does, you will be okay. You will still be worthy. You will still be lovable. And for the first time, you can experience a relationship without constantly preparing for its ending. Thank you for watching. If this resonates with you, I encourage you to subscribe because that's exactly what we talk about here.